afternoon. If you are here for the closing keynote, you're the serious people. Give yourselves a round of applause. This is where the rubber meets the road. So you understand that the work of diversity and inclusion is serious work. But first, let me recognize the talent, the hard work of Nika and Carlos's team. Didn't they put on a great day today? I've been speaking now for over 21 years, and I have never seen an operation like this. It is better than any military precision operation I've ever seen. So Nika, my hat's off to you and your team. Let me also thank all the speakers. A day like this cannot happen without multiple people coming together and sharing their expertise. And at the end of the day, it is now your job to figure out, what are you going to do? Because at some point, you have to get from soaking in all the information and asking all the questions, and then the piece comes that says, what am I going to do? And unless you can honestly ask that question and answer it and feel good about the answer and be prepared to act. So my job today is to help you get the last items on the ship. As shipmates, you watch Nika and her team load the first batch of items, and you're waiting for your turn to get on the ship. Get up. It's time to go. But I don't want you coming empty-handed. I want you to come with your own load. So you can't let the captain only pack the ship. You have to bring your supplies. And what I want to do today is to challenge you and help you figure out, what supplies do you need to bring on this ship, so when we leave the harbor for this very long journey, you are going to be prepared. You've heard stats being spoken about around diversity and inclusion. You heard stories. You heard about the strategies that different companies have been using. And now my question to you is, what is your personal strategy? There are three things I want you to remember today. One, I want you to take ownership from today. I'm not talking about the company goals. I'm not talking about your organizational endeavors. I'm talking about how are you going to take ownership. So ownership is the first piece that I want you to think about. Number two, I want you to think about, what consistent action are you prepared to take? See, talk is really wonderful. Oh yes, I went to this fabulous diversity and inclusion workshop, and Nika's team did a great job. So what? Tomorrow morning, you're going to go back to your regular day-to-day and give me excuses. I don't want excuses. I want consistent action. But I don't want you to stop there, because anybody can do that. Karen says, ownership. Let's take consistent action. But then I want you to take it one step further. I want you to multiply yourself. I want you to become infectious. I want, and you walk into a room, people don't have to see your diversity strategy. They should see it all on you. Because everything you do on a daily basis, whether or not you have a title, oozes diversity and inclusion. I'll tell you how I got started in the field. As Kathy said, I'm from the beautiful island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That's a round of applause. It is a shameless plug. Now, I know I'm in the South, and not many people know where that is, but it's next to Barbados. But my parents decided to come to the United States of America in January to Boston, Massachusetts. And I kept wondering, have they ever heard of Arizona, California? I mean, come on. I'm 15 years old, and they put me in this thing that felt like a spacesuit. You call it a winter jacket when you're in Boston. So we came to Boston, and I'm from an island where we're a majority. Most of the people look like me, so my experience as a person of color didn't exist. As a matter of fact, guess when I learned that I was black? When I went to Brunswick, Maine for college. And I realized then what it meant to be a black woman. Because up until then, my experience was that of a majority culture. My culture is a very classist culture. So you need to be from a particular family, your family name. When you meet someone, they'll say, oh, you're Karen Hinds. Oh, the Hinds family. Now, is it yours because you married into it, or is it yours because it's born? And then there's a whole different conversation. So when I talk about diversity, I come from a very different angle. And it wasn't until I got to Maine, and I went to school in Maine, and it was a predominantly white college, and I understand what it means to be a black woman living in America. And my first job out of college, they offered me a position to help build talent pipelines for financial services companies. I knew nothing about diversity and inclusion. What I realized, however, is this. My job was to help kids in an inner city high school who were from China, South America, the inner city of Boston. They're from the Caribbean. And the goal was to help these young students begin to explore careers in the financial services area. And I had to help them make sure that they stay in that program and consider it after. Now, there's a problem with that. See, I saw that my students were going into these jobs and didn't feel comfortable. And I also had supervisors who didn't quite know what to do with them. So I knew that my students were talented. So I didn't have a diversity title. I had a problem. And I had to figure out, how do I ensure that my students, who I knew were very talented, learn the system? Mind you, I'm learning it all along because I'm pretty new to the country. So as I am learning, I am teaching my students how to be effective in corporate America as I learn. A lot of us are waiting for a diversity and inclusion title. Don't wait for one. You are diversity and inclusion. You need to get up and forget for a little while that there's a diversity and inclusion officer who would think that they know everything. Let me tell you a secret. They're trying to figure it out too. So if they're trying to figure it out, wouldn't it be great if you came alongside them and be the voice that projects, be the voice that helped them figure out, be the voice that, like I was at 24 years old, trying to help my students figure out how do they stay in an environment that is financial services, predominantly white, in Boston, Massachusetts. I knew I had a problem that my students needed to ensure that they got exposure to and access to opportunities that these companies had to offer. And I had to ensure that I do what was right. Might I say, a lot of those students right now, we're still very much in contact with them. I go to their weddings. I hear about their babies being christened. And although some of them did not end up in financial services, they're in professional careers where ordinarily they would not have been exposed to if they had not gone to that program. So my challenge to you is, don't wait for a D&I title. Don't just wait for the company to come up with a strategy. What is your personal strategy? This becomes a very personal action item that I want from you. Again, I want you to take ownership. I want you to take consistent action. And I want you to multiply yourself. Because if you're able to start right at your table and impact somebody else, and they feel included and they impact somebody else, by golly, your diversity strategy is being created right there at your table and you don't even realize it. So what are the 3 things I want you to do? Can you remember? What's the first one? Second one? Third one? Don't just say it, because now I'm going to give you homework. Because you can't get to a conference like this and be exposed to such awesome expertise all day long and soak it up and keep it for yourself. See, my parents were farmers in the Caribbean. Mom and dad, for them, the way they made a living was to sell bananas and sweet potatoes and oranges and ship them to the United Kingdom, to the United States, and to Canada. And there are a couple of things I learned from them. And one of them is the way they treat bananas. Now, if you know how to grow bananas, I like to eat them. After a while, when I was a kid, I got tired of eating bananas because every time you go to somebody's house, they had a banana. I'm thinking, I don't want to see another banana. But I recognize there's a technique to growing bananas. And as I talk about multiplication, I want you to remember this. When the bananas get to a certain stage, you have to put a blue plastic bag over it. And that blue plastic bag is going to protect it from insects. It's going to protect it from the weather. The idea is to protect your crop. Now, a lot of you right here, you have to remember that my topic today is called Empowering Leaders of Distinction. And I want you to think about what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the afternoon is how do we put that blue plastic bag around the leaders that we are growing right now and protect them. And at the same time, allow them to grow and mature. Because it's only with that protection can they become the best bunch of bananas that they can. And for a number of you, you need to protect the people who are coming up through the leadership ranks so they can help extend and expand and move forward and push for your D&I agenda. So with that, let's go through some really basic pieces that you need to be very much aware of. So here's some things I want you to remember. I'm sure you heard this in Raven's session. There are now 5 generations in the workplace. That means you have 5 different lenses coming through your job. You have 5 different ways, and a whole lot more than 5, that you need to pay attention to the way people do business. But as you think about the generations, I want you to be mindful that the characteristics that are described for each generation, please don't use that as a prescription for everyone in that generation. Because I might be a Gen X or a millennial or a Gen Z, but my culture and the way I was brought up, or even where I was brought up, will dictate a different kind of behavior. So as we talk about D&I, as we talk about developing leaders, be very mindful that we think about the generations, why this is going to be critical in D&I. Number 2, you have 10,000 boomers saying, bye-bye, my time is up. Where's Herb? Is Herb still here? He's probably gone home now, huh? He went home to take care of his dog. But Herb is one of those 10,000 who left the workplace and said, sayonara, I have other things to do. And when they leave, they're taking decades of information with them if we're not very mindful of how we do that knowledge transfer. But what's really troubling is not only do we have the generations and people leaving, but if we have 56% of organizations not ready to meet leadership needs, how are your D&I strategies and plans going to be affected? It's not about developing better plans. It's about developing people who understand what needs to be done. So when you come to developing that plan, it's a foregone conclusion. Of course we're going to do D&I. What do you mean? So we want to make sure that we're spending the time educating and grooming the next generation of leaders, that we're empowering them to understand why D&I is critical. But it can't be done in a vacuum. And here's where I want you to start thinking about what's my role. So number one, do you know your value? Karen, what are you talking about? We're talking about strategy. We're talking about plans. Well, the plans and the strategy means nothing because a lot of people are very fearful of diversity and inclusion because they don't even know what value they bring to the organization. Therefore, when you bring someone else in who has different qualifications, they feel a little threatened sometimes. So at your table, this is about work. And I want you to think about, what is your value? Do you know the value you? Forget about the people around your table right now. What is it you bring to the table? And if you're not sure how to articulate that, I don't want you to tell me your title. I don't really care about your title, and nobody cares about your title. What they care about is, what is the value you bring? And think about it in terms of facts. A fact is something that is true. So you need to be very mindful that when you say that this is who I am, that you're arguing facts. Don't argue feelings. Feelings are fickle. They come and they go. So when you walk into an organization, you have to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, how do you impact that organization? And don't tell me what your title is, because that can change. So take a minute right now, and I want you to write down 5 facts about the value you bring to the organization. You don't have to share with anybody, but you have to know. So when you go back and someone says, so what company you work with? Oh, I'm the salesperson for XYZ Corporation. No. You have to tell them the value you bring to the company. So the company at all times will know why you're important to them. So write down right now 5 things. What's the value you bring to the company? Don't tell me your title. I want you to think about the facts. What have you contributed? What is it makes you important? Why should they even keep you? Because we're in a time right now where it's very critical that you know what you bring to the table. And it has to be a fact. Don't tell me what you feel. Feeling's not important at this point. We'll get to that in a little while. Number 2, I'm going to move fast because I want to make sure I leave time for Q&A after. Number 2, I want you to start recruiting, retaining, and refreshing your personal and professional tribes. Everybody has a cell phone, I'm assuming. Take out your cell phone, please, and get to the photos section of your cell phone. Look at the photos for a little while, and just scroll through the photo section and see how much diverse people pop up. Optical diversity we're looking at right now. Just scroll through. Who do you have in your photos? Who do you have at your kitchen table? Who do you have at your social gatherings? Who do you have speaking into your ear? See, we can talk about D&I all we want, but at the end of the day, it is just a bunch of talk unless we figure out who has your ear. And we can tell who has your ear by looking at who you think is valuable in your life. So if all the photos that are diverse in your phone are for the most part in your professional life, but when you get home, it's a completely different set of people, think about that. Because we are our true selves when we're very comfortable. Because when I'm comfortable, I do not speak like this all the time. When I go home back and I'm in the Caribbean or my Caribbean people, it might go something like this. Well, what happened, man? What's going on? What will I do later on? We go lime now. I wouldn't speak like that when I'm with you. But in that relaxed environment, I'm able to process and I hear more, and we talk about covering earlier on. Obviously, I won't bring my Caribbean accent to the boardroom because you won't understand a thing I'm saying if I bring that dialect. However, I want you to think about who has your ear. And you can tell who has your ear by looking through your photos and seeing who are you spending time with. Because the conversation we will have in the office lunchroom and the one we will have at my kitchen table will be 2 very different conversations. So my challenge to you with this one is this. Can you consider inviting someone into your inner circle? Can you consider inviting someone who you ordinarily would not associate with to dinner or to a family event or through one of the functions, or you may be involved with an association, and you're very passionate about that association, invite them to something that you really care and value, and let them get to see who you are as an individual. Because by the time you build that relationship, and you need their support when you have your D&I strategy, it will be a different conversation, because oftentimes we're trying to speak to strangers who we don't understand. And that's a difficult sell. People do business with those they know, like, and trust. And we need you to get to know. You might always have to like them, but at least get to a place where you can trust. The other piece I want you to think about when you get home, don't have to do this one right now, is who's in your top 25. And it's important to know who's in your top 25 people that you value, because when we talk about succession planning, when we talk about recruiting, when we talk about retention, if the 25 people, the top 25 people who influence you all look like you, all sound like you, all go to the same kinds of school, how are you going to find talent? I worked with a financial services company recently on their diversity and inclusion strategy. And we talked about how were they going to build their organization. And as we evaluated a particular department, we found out that this one department, everyone was from an Ivy League school, except one person. And they all look the same. And you're thinking, well, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that the people who didn't go to Ivy League schools can't cut it? Well, I don't believe so. It's because they weren't even aware of the bias that they were perpetuating on a daily basis when they recruited. And they had to stop and ask themselves, how did this happen? But what do you mean, how did it happen? I know how it happened. You have to be very cognizant. So when you think about your 25, who's in your top 25? And this goes for people who are of color as well. Because sometimes we only look on the other side of the fence and think, well, who's in their 25? Well, who's in yours? And if they all look like you, ding, 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 it's just as much as a problem. So this is a challenge to everyone, whether, regardless of what you look like, who's in your top 25? And the last piece, when we talk about recruiting and training and refreshing your professional and personal tribe, is something that my company developed called the Macy's strategy. Now, the Macy's strategy is important because we know we're not going shopping, because Macy's is a department store up in the Northeast. And it's not about the shopping, but I want you to tell you why we came up with this acronym. The Macy's stand for mentors, advocates, sometimes called sponsors, colleagues, and young professionals. Now, when you have a Macy's strategy that's diverse, recruiting and retaining becomes a whole lot easier. When you have a Macy's strategy that's diverse in that you have mentors who are able to pour into your life and help you, and you can be a mentor to somebody else, it's a different conversation. When you can build yourself up, when you can know the value you bring to an organization, and then attract advocates, attract sponsors who know of the work that you do because of how you operate, it makes your strategy so much easier. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, I said easier. And C for colleagues. When you sit at lunch on a daily basis, do you sit and have lunch and coffee with the same people every day? And I know right now that you're sitting at your company tables, but for a number of you, you traveled Impact. And I know, I just want to say a big shout out, by the way, to the Chattanooga people who drove 4 hours just to get here. And they're making sure that they split up and conquer this entire conference. So yay for the folks from Chattanooga. Thank you for coming. The why is for young professionals. Unless we take the time now and start reaching back and grooming, we're not going to get anywhere fast. And this is your personal strategy. See, if you're doing this, when it's time for someone to be promoted, when it's time for a new position to be filled, you can say, hold on, let me check my top 25. When they say, oh, we can't find anyone, hold on, I have some young professionals I've been grooming. Because the problem isn't that we can't find talent. It's like fishing in the same pond that's dry. Meanwhile, there's a fishing hole a couple of miles down the road, but that means you actually have to get up and go on the other side down the road and find a pond that's teeming with fish that can come and be right in your organization. So I don't buy that we can't find talent piece. Next piece I want to make sure. I want you to write your personal operating manual. Well, what does that have to do with diversity and inclusion? Because we will begin to see the habits and the disciplines that you have that will help dictate your success as a leader. Because a leader right now, so before you have the title of a leader, before you have all the trappings of leadership, before anybody even know you exist, if you can let the world know just by your daily actions that you value D&I, and remember, if you're doing the ownership, if you're doing the piece on consistent action, and you are ensuring that you multiply because it's one of your values, doesn't it make a whole lot more sense at this stage before you move up? And remember, I said I want this to be infectious. So if you're doing this now when you have no title, when you are probably just someone who is thinking, well, I'm just a team member. No, do it now. So everyone who's around you would know what you stand for now. So by the time you get promoted, nobody's trying to convince you of D&I. It's already in who you are. So what are your values? What are the disciplines? What are the habits you could employ right now to demonstrate that? And I like to say, come up with at least 5. Come up with at least 5 because you want people to know you by the way you operate now. The problem I always have with leadership development is by the time you start training someone to be a leader, it's too late. They already have all their bad habits. So they're walking around, well, I'm a leader, you know, I got here just fine. And you're scratching your head thinking, you got here just fine, but I'm not sure you're going to be here that long. So how do we ensure that we start now? It's a groundswell, it's a grassroots effort to ensure that people are where they need to be. Next one I want to share with you. I want you to be comfortable and confident with chaos. And I mean, I don't see any reason why as leaders we should think it's going to be easy. If anything else, your job is to solve problems. End of story. And if you go into leadership thinking, well, you know, it's a nice title, it's a cushy job, I have a nice corner office, I'm going to question that. Because as a leader, your job is to solve problems. And I've met too many leaders who say, well, Karen, you don't know my schedule. And I'm thinking, what does your schedule have to do with any of this? Your job is to solve problems. So are you solving problems? But you don't know. You don't understand, Karen. Are you solving problems? No, I'm executing. Executing what? You should be solving problems or equipping your people with the information that they need so they can solve problems for you. And in that case, you're still solving problems because your team is a reflection of who you are, right? So solve problems because that's what an effective leader does. And this one, your job is to grow people. Now, if your job is to grow people, imagine the leader who gets D&I, who you don't have to sell them on it, and they start growing a team that values diversity and inclusion. What a concept. I mean, could you believe that? So you have a leader who gets it, and their job now is to not only solve problems, but grow people, because they're not helping people come into their full potential. And what a joy it is when, as a leader, you can help usher people into the greatness that they were born for. Because when they see that you're helping them open doors, that they have access to opportunity, it makes it a whole lot easier to sell almost anything you want to sell because they see that you're invested in them. See, we keep waiting for D&I professionals to have the plan that works for everyone. No, the plan is you. You are the plan. And until you take ownership of that, it's going to be very difficult for your company to move the agenda forward. Because I would like to see companies where before the D&I plan is written, we have leaders who are pulling their teams together and say, I want to ensure that we are meeting your needs. We've taken D&I into a place that seems almost disconnected from humans. It's this plan. It's the strategy. It is marketing. It is all these things. It is human beings trying to find a place in the world. And until we get that, we will forever keep talking about plans. Plans are critical, but humans are the ones putting the plans in place. We have to get that. And if you are not comfortable and confident in chaos, you are not ready. And you can't be comfortable and you can't be confident in chaos if you don't know the value you bring to the organization, because you constantly feel that you need to compete. It's not about competition, because the competition really is about yourself. And if you can show up and bring your best effort to the company on a daily basis without wavering, without wondering about what the other person's doing, that's the conversation you should be having. Can you do that? Can you be comfortable and confident in chaos without worrying about what other people are doing? And just know you are running your race and you're doing what you're supposed to do. Because whether you have the title of leader or not, you're knowing I am going to ensure that the people who work with me, who work for me, are in a place where they feel valued. And you don't need a title for that. In some places, it's something as simple as when you go out for drinks after work, you invite someone. In other places, it's as simple as when you're coming on Monday morning and you ask, so how was your weekend? That you actually stop and listen. See, I grew up in the Caribbean where when you ask someone, how are you doing? They actually stop and listen. And the first few months I came to the United States, I remember walking through the streets and I would say, hi, how are you doing? And I would stand up and wait. I didn't know, okay? I was waiting to actually hear it say, hi, I'm fine, goodbye. Hi, how are you doing? Fine. Wait. Hi, how are you doing sometimes can make all the difference in helping someone to feel included. Because on Monday morning when you come in from the weekend and you have a conversation at someone's desk, or you're having a conversation and you're standing around in the cafeteria, and you don't ask this person how was their weekend, but you stand and you ask these people, you've automatically made me feel excluded right away, even though we might be in the same team. One company we work with, they had a female executive who moved into her office, and for a month, none of the guys spoke to her. An entire month, unless they were delivering paperwork, unless they were giving her orders, unless they were doing something. They just pretended that she wasn't even there. She was almost invisible until she said enough. So let's not get stuck on the big plans. Let's get down to the very basic piece of how do you ensure that you're comfortable in the chaos, but you're ensuring that you're solving problems. I love this one, because oftentimes when we talk about, well, let's communicate with power, you're looking for someone to speak in another language. So, hola, ¿cómo estás? Soy muy bien, gracias. Oh, how are you doing? Oh, you're thinking, all right, ni hao. You're thinking about other ways in which you can speak a different language. And that's great, because we're moving in a very multicultural society where you have multiple languages, and that's important. But I want to talk about a different language, the I care language. Have you heard of that one? I want to talk about I understand your style and personality language. Have you heard about that one? Because sometimes we as human beings, we get into our own little mix. So I'm a morning person. I'm a 4 a.m. kind of gal, wake up and ready to take on the world. Some of you are thinking, not today, Karen, not today. And some of you are 11 p.m. kind of person. And understanding styles, because we only think of D&I in terms of optics, but diversity and inclusion is also about personality. It's about intellectual ability. It's about so much more than what we see. And understanding that the person that you're trying to get the most out of them at 8 o'clock in the morning, they don't really come into full energy until 1 p.m. Or the person that you're trying your best to motivate at 3 p.m., they can't focus on you because you're giving them a project that's going to take 4 hours or 3 hours, and they're thinking about their child who they need to pick up from daycare, and they have other issues happening. You have to think about D&I as a much broader piece. It's not just the things that you see. So understanding the style, the personality, understanding the lifestyle. I have a friend who is from Thailand. And for her, she lives in a multi-generational house. So there's her and her husband and their children. There's the husband's parents. But there's grandma, great-grandma, and all of those generations, literally 4 or 5 generations. And when they talk about being able to take care of the family, the definition of family has changed. So if grandma's sick, it's important for you to know that grandma is a part of the family, and that you have to speak that language because you can't interpret family as mom and dad and a bunch of kids anymore. That's important. And the last piece here is the basic greeting in the language of the employees. I had one instance where we work with a particular organization, and it was the holiday season. And this particular person did not celebrate Christmas. And nobody on the team stopped to ask, what do you celebrate? Do you celebrate anything? Until one person said, so tell me about your culture. Tell me about what it is you do, and how is this like in your family? And it was as if somebody had turned on a light bulb in a very dark room. And for the first time, that person felt, like, you cared enough to ask about who I was, and not just expect me to keep churning out a bunch of numbers and reports and client meetings and bringing in money. You cared about who I was. So when you greet that person in the morning, they even ask, so what do you say at this time of year? And they proceeded to explain the next time they saw them. They said, oh, let me greet you in your native language. Or, oh, let me speak to you in a way that you understand. Because sometimes we just assume that everyone is thinking and acting and behaving the same way as we do. And that's not the case. Be a follower. Why do I want to be a follower in a time when we're saying, you all should be leaders? We all can't be leaders. Somebody has to follow. If everybody is leading, who's following? And it's important to follow because you might not be the one setting the direction of the organization. So somebody has to follow, but you know what's important? I want people who challenge you, because we only follow people who we like and who tell us what we want to hear. And there are some people who, my mentor called them irritants. There's some people in your life who you need to have as an irritant. See, an irritant is the kind of person who's going to just rub up against you and just get you just a little bit aggravated enough to think. An irritant is the kind of person who would challenge you and not just take you for everything that you say. We need irritants in our lives because sometimes the irritant is a person who can help bring out the absolute best in you. So who's challenging you? Who are you listening to? Who are you actually taking the time now to make them feel good? And are you actually observing? Because if you're following, you're going to see what's going on within the organization. If you're being attentive, you're going to be able to give intel to your leaders. You notice we've forgotten the remote workers because they're out there. Nobody's even thought to include them in the company celebration. Did we look at that? You got to be observer. You can't just be a leader all the time. And last but not least, I want you to foster and thrive within inclusive communities. So you got to keep on learning. And earlier on today, someone was saying this, and I said, that's my point. So remember when you were a kid in the playground? You're not that old. When you were a kid in the playground, if you were the popular kid, You know you always got picked on all the time. Yes, I want you for my team. I want you for my team. I want you for my team. And you're thinking, yes, we're going to beat them now. And then there are the kids in the back who know they have talent, but they haven't awoken yet to their full potential, or they're not popular, or they don't quite fit in. And a lot of us as adults are like little kids in the playground. Nobody's picked us. But you know what's worse than not being picked? Is when you have the power to pick, you don't pick people either. But we complain about not being chosen. But who are you picking? Because every day you have a choice as to how you live and how you move and where you go and what you do and who's in your circle and who do you impact. So who are you picking? But you can always point the finger and say, well, they didn't pick me. Who are you picking? You've got to stop and ask yourself, when I have the opportunity to choose, to pick that kid, the proverbial kid on the playground, do I? Or do I go in automatic mode and forget about them? Last but not least, it's about relevance. You know, one of our speakers said earlier on today, thank you very much, Victoria, for saying that by 2045 will be majority, most of us will not be, by 2025, our population will be made up of people who are diverse than not. Yes. So it's not about so much whether you want to or not, it's about relevance. Is your company going to be around? End of story. Let's get very real. Is your company going to be around? I'm still working with companies. I'm still hearing conversations about, well, I don't know about this diversity and inclusion stuff. Oh, really? And I always like to say, so I guess you like leaving money on the table. No, I don't like leaving money. Well, let's think about it. If you tell me you don't know about this diversity and inclusion stuff, because that's what this starts, this stuff, and I'm telling you that the stats are saying that your population is changing, obviously you like leaving money on the table, number one, and obviously you have no intentions of being relevant in the next 20 years. Well, not really, Karen. We're doing really well now. Operative word, now. And until we're willing to have those bold conversations, where you're not afraid to let people know this is not about your feelings, it's about facts. Here are the facts of where we are right now. We're forever going to keep going, well, I'm not sure about this diversity and inclusion stuff. No. Is your company, do you want to be around? And do you want to be relevant? Do you want to be profitable? Because the people who are going to help you get there, they want to know you care. And not just hire them because you're going to make a buck, because you really know that the talent that they bring to the table is critical. I like challenges. And I believe if you're going to come to a conference like this, tomorrow you're going to say, Karen who? Karen Hinds? Never heard of her. So I'm going to end with a challenge only for those of you who are serious. This is only for those of you who are serious. I've given you 7 different areas to think about. And over the next 7 weeks, with Nika's permission, I'm going to send you out a challenge every week. Because if you tell me you're serious about D&I, you should be doing something starting now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Every day you wake up, you should be thinking, how am I going to make a difference? And how am I going to make this work? So for the next 7 weeks, I'm going to challenge you that each week you take the time to figure out, what are you going to do to take ownership? What are you going to do to take consistent action? And what are you going to do to multiply yourself? Because unless you multiply yourself, you're keeping all the good information you heard all day to yourself, and that does nothing. I want you to grow yourself and grow those around you. I want you to be infectious. So when you go back to your offices, they're going to say, what happened at that conference? And you should sit them down and say, let me tell you what happened at that conference. Because not only are you going to tell them, you're going to infect them. And you're going to affect them by showing them your consistent action. And when they see your consistent action, they're going to know that you take ownership of DE&I starting with you. So by the time they find a diversity officer, by the time they bring someone who's going to show you the strategy, you're thinking, we're way ahead of you. Let me show you what we've done. 7 weeks, 7 habits. Those of you who are ready for the challenge and who tell me you're serious, let's get moving. I thank you very much for your time today. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone have at this time. If you have questions, we'll open up the floor for questions at this time.
Hi, Karen.
Hi.
So I have a quick question.
Right ahead.
Very committed to diversity and inclusion and equity as well. And going back to kind of what we talked about in Raven's presentation, us millennials are ready for change. We're ready for it now. So something that's come up in my community is there are some of us that are very ready for change and we think it should happen right now. And there are some of us who are a little bit slower to change. They want more information. They want to know why we need it, kind of things like that. So some of us are moving a little faster than others. Is there a good way to bridge that gap? Like not move, I think it should be fast. I think that it should fix right now. So is there a way to not move too fast for some people and not too slow for others? Is there a way to kind of do that at a good speed?
So I think at anything you do in life, there are some people who are always going to be way ahead and some people who are still catching up. So that's the first thing. So it's not unique to D&I. I think what's important is to figure out, one, educate the company and the employees on what is it you're doing. Because some people genuinely don't know. They don't understand why it's important, and for them, it's a very large hurdle to overcome. So start by ensuring that they know the why, and start with small steps for some people, depending on who's leading the charge. So start with, here are the things we're going to accomplish in the next 3 to 6 months, and then do it incrementally after that. Because if the key decision makers are on board, which is what you need, it's very difficult to lead a D&I charge from the grassroots going up. But once the key decision makers are on board, think of it as it's a business imperative, number one. So what do they need to do? And that will dictate the speed of which you need to move. So look at what's critical for the business now, and then start there. But people will always be, some will be slower, some will be faster, and that's normal. But let's look at what does the business need to do now. Start with incremental steps, show results, be transparent, and take it from there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, I thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you. Have a great day, everyone.